Welcome to Lead Pods, the official leadership podcast from USMB for pastors and church leaders, where our goal is to increase our impact together.
Hello friends, welcome to episode 86 of the USMB Lead Pods. My name is Matt Ersman, and once again, grateful to share another really great episode with you, where today we're continuing a conversation that we started last week, talking about the idea of living missionally in our communities and what that looks like for different leaders in the USMB family. This week we're talking to two pastors whose lives and whose ministry looks quite a bit different from John and Abby from last week, but this week I'm talking to Jason Quiring and Drew Pankratz, who are the pastors of Greenhouse Community Church in Saratoga Springs, Utah. And their community in Utah, as you might expect, with the high population of the LDS Church, the Latter-day Saints Church, looks quite a bit different from those of us who live in different parts of the country. They plan and speak and even hang out in strategic places in their community in an effort to reach people who might not otherwise come across their church. And as you'll hear from a conversation today, they're very intentional about how they handle all those things and all the unique challenges and opportunities that come from being in the community where you're actually the minority. So kind of similar to our conversation last time, Jason and Drew might do things in their ministry that may not be a perfect fit for you and your ministry, but as you will find out in our conversation, I think the American culture as a whole is becoming more and more like the culture that they're witnessing to in Utah. So I'm looking forward to you hearing that conversation and seeing how this might play out in your community. So let's take a quick break to hear from a sponsor, and then we'll talk to Jason and Drew from Greenhouse about what it looks like to live missionally in our communities.
MB Foundation provides biblical financial stewardship solutions to the Mennonite Brethren community. We encourage stewardship and generosity through the gathering, management, and distribution of financial resources for Christ and His kingdom. Let us assist you in giving meaning to money. Our services include planned giving, loans, fund management, investment certificates, and stewardship education. With offices in Hillsborough, Kansas, and Fresno, California, we are ready to serve you. Learn more at www.mbfoundation.com or call us today at 1-800-551-1547. MB Foundation is pleased to partner with USMB to bring you this episode of Lead Pods.
All right, my friends, well, I've got two new friends to introduce you to today for another really great conversation I'm looking forward to. So today we are joined by Jason Quiring. He is the pastor of Greenhouse Community Church in Utah, as well as Drew Pankratz. His title is up in the air. He's either the co-pastor or the youth and associate pastor, depending on who you ask. So, guys, thanks so much for being here today. Really appreciate both of your time. Looking forward to talking with you.
Awesome. Thanks for having us on.
Thanks for having us, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. So Greenhouse has been around for about 10 years. It's in a really interesting part of the country. We'll spend a lot of time talking about Utah and the LDS church and how your church is kind of uniquely positioned there. But Jason, can you tell us more, anything else about you that you want to share, and maybe just some basics about how Greenhouse got started?
Yeah, absolutely. And Jason Quiring grew up in Henderson, Nebraska, grew up at the MB church there, went to Tabor College, met my wife, was a youth pastor in Fairview, Oklahoma for 7 years, had a great experience there, had dreams of retiring there, but God kind of messed those up. And we came to Utah. We fell in love with the people in the place. And so actually left for a few years, got my master's degree. And then we went through a period of discernment and really felt a strong desire and pull in calling to come back and to plant a church and to do missions work here. And so, that was in 2013. And it's been great. It's hard to believe that it's already been 10 years ago. We have 4 kids. Our oldest is a senior at Tabor, and our twin boys are going into their freshman year in college. And we have our daughter's going to be a junior in high school. So it's weird to think about how quickly time has flown, but it's been pretty amazing here.
And Drew, same thing for you. Tell us anything else about you and your background, and how did you end up at Greenhouse?
Yeah, so born and raised near Buhler, Kansas. Grew up there in Buhler MB Church and Christian home, and very thankful for that foundation. Was really, really good experience growing up there. But kind of fell away from the Lord a little bit during high school years, and just, was doing my thing, involved heavily in sports and in different relationships. And that became a big focus of my life. And it wasn't until I got out of high school, my freshman year, where God really started to kind of work in my heart in new ways and opening my eyes to who He is and what the gospel really looks like, and transforming my life. And so during that freshman year, a lot of growth, a lot of good things, and then decided I was going to transfer to Tabor. And so went to Tabor for my sophomore through senior years. And it was during my sophomore year where things kind of hit rock bottom with just life circumstances and things. And I really surrendered my life to the Lord for the first time there when I was about 20 years old. And so that was a very pivotal turning point for me my sophomore year. And then after that, I'm just super, super grateful for friendships and relationships that I found there at Tabor that helped disciple me. And just the spiritual formation part of my journey was huge during my time there. And majored in biblical studies and youth ministry, and interned at Hillsborough MB for a year after I graduated. I got married that summer, and then Allie and I moved out to Utah in summer of 16. So Greenhouse was 3 years in at the time, and they were looking for a worship director, worship pastor, and a youth pastor. And Allie does worship and I did youth. So it was kind of a package deal. And we both decided, hey, let's give it a shot. Allie had actually spent some years in Utah growing up. Her dad, Rod Jost, was a pastor out here. And so she was familiar with Utah. I was not. And so the whole idea of moving to Utah was quite foreign and quite scary, if I'm being honest. But we were able to come out and visit, and just really impacted by the ministry and Jason and Nicole and how they're living on mission, and decided, hey, God, let's dive in. And it's been a blast ever since.
Very cool.
The awesome. story with Drew and Allie is really special too, because Allie's parents, Rod and Lynette, were very good friends and mentors of Nicole's and mine. And I interned for him, and we watched Allie grow up from little child on, and Nicole stayed really close with Allie. And so immediately we were like, hey, we, see if we can get her to come back out to Utah. And I found out she was dating this biblical studies major. So we're like, let's check this guy out, see if he's what kind of a guy he is. And yeah, it just really, really clicked. And it was fun talking with Drew and Allie, because they were trying to decide, do we go into youth ministry or do we go into missions? And I was like, well, come and do both. And so it's a really unique fit and opportunity, both them and what we were doing, that also just as a church family and yeah, just life, living on mission. And it's been really fun to see that grow so deeply over the last 7 years. And it's been an incredible partnership with them. So,
well, I just have to say, I didn't realize you had the Rod Jost connection. I feel like it's just MB bingo, right? At some point, we're going to stay near Anna. So that's
there's a lot of full circles.
Stories. All of it. Well, I don't want to veer us too far off here, but Jason, we were talking just briefly before we started recording, and you just said that Drew was interested in missions, and you kind of mentioned that when you planted the church, it wasn't necessarily church planting, it was more missions is kind of how you started. So we've talked about some of the other MB churches in Utah and the LDS stuff before, which I think is so fascinating. If people haven't listened, or I'm sure your church is even different from the other churches we've talked to, talk to us about that. Like, why was it more missions than church planting? I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for us, church planting was never on our radar. I wasn't really interested in church planting. I was more interested in maybe church revitalization and renewal, things like that. But then when we came out to Utah, we lived in northern Utah County the first time when I was youth pastor at SMCC. And at the time, there was just very little other options as far as Christianity-wise goes, Christian churches. And so I think for the first time in our lives, we actually saw, hey, there is a real tangible need for more Christian churches in northern Utah County, and 90% being of the LDS faith. And at the time, the last census was 90% would be LDS or LDS background, and then 0.8% historical biblical evangelical Christian. Wow. And so we were looking at those dynamics and just say that, anything under 2% is considered an unreached people group. Yeah. And so as God just tugged at our hearts and kind of showed us the needs, but then we also went through a season of just kind of introspection and discovery of who we are, how God's made us, what makes us, click, what really, who are we and how do we fit into the mission? We just resonate a lot more with missionary work. Mm-hmm. And so we kind of joked that we were missionaries who also just so happened to be planning a church. And so strategically, philosophically, all those things, we went in with a different model. And God is using all of the different models, right? Like
Yeah.
I think there is such a unique, Utah is such a unique mission field, and God is doing such amazing things. And it's fun to see different styles, different approaches that are being effective, and God's using them. And so it's fun to be able to be a part of that. And so, yeah, we just really resonated more with kind of a missionary approach. And we like to say we're living on incarnational mission, just
Yeah.
being in the community, thinking, acting, living like missionaries. And yeah, so that's been really, really key for us.
When Allie and I were dating throughout college, and every now and then she would mention Greenhouse Community Church in Utah. And I'm like, what in the world is the greenhouse? And she'd tell me, what are they growing at this greenhouse? But she would tell me, like, I don't know a ton about it, but great friends, Jason and Nicole Quiring, they're church planting out there. And I'm like, okay, that's awesome. And like, what does that look like? What do they do? And I was just very confused because she said, well, they just kind of gather around their living room and meet people and hang out with people from the community. And they meet in a sports bar like once a month. And so it was just so organic and so relational and so different than my typical understanding of what church planning looked like. You get the building, you launch, and then people come, right? But it was a very different approach. And I was very intrigued by it and wanted to learn more. I had no idea what learning more would look like, but it just goes to show just a little bit of a different approach from kind of your traditional model, but very grateful for it.
Yeah. I have so many questions. I want to hear more about that, because when you mentioned that your area is 90% LDS, like when I look around at my community, I'm in Wichita, Kansas. I'm not sure we're 90% anything. Like 90% is huge. Like most of the country doesn't have 90% of anything, I would say. I think I'm wondering if you guys have felt unique in that, because you guys are both white Christian males. In most American situations, you'd be the majority. So I guess what was that like for you guys to walk into a community where you're instantly in the minority? Can you just, for those of us who haven't spent time in Utah, can you just tell us what that's been like for you?
Saratoga Springs on the surface level looks like anywhere USA, right? Like growing up in Henderson, being in Hillsborough, being in Fairview, predominantly white, predominantly Christian. Henderson was 1,000 people in 3 Christian churches, and they were all of the Anabaptist, background. Fairview had 2,500 people, and I think 13 to 15 Christian churches. And so I always laugh that moving to Utah, the first 30 years of my life finally made sense to me, because everybody thought I was on the inside. Here I'm at the time, I didn't have a beard. I was clean cut. I had 4 little kids and a white minivan, right? Everybody thought we were LDS,
Okay.
So everybody just was confused when we didn't show up to the LDS ward on Sundays, and so on one hand, it's very family friendly, very moral, it's very inviting, very friendly. We love the area. It's not until you start getting into some of the deeper doctrinal issues. And even culturally, I know a lot of Midwest USA has kind of changed, but there's some similarities to how I grew up, culturally speaking. Very religious, very, like that. So it wasn't a huge adjustment right off the bat. It was a little bit intimidating. I remember when we came here the first time, we were asked, does the thought that 99% of the people that you'll see every day believing differently than you, does that exhaust you or excite you? And I look back and I said, I have no idea, because I have no framework for that.
Right.
I have no idea. And we always say that Utah will get under your skin one way or another. Either it'll drive you deeper in your faith, and you'll grow in your love for what God loves, or you'll run the other way because it's too scary and it's too intimidating. And it's been pretty amazing just to see God really, grow our hearts in that. And there's deep foundational doctrinal differences, but yet we're surrounded by people that we love, that God loves, that God is working in and calling to himself. And so sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming, but really, people are people, and God loves people. And so we want to be a part of what God's doing.
Yeah. And I think the LDS stuff is so interesting because I don't know a whole lot about it, but my understanding is that some LDS people consider themselves Christians. Some Christians probably consider LDS people to be
Yep.
Christians.
Yep.
And like you just said, our external lives probably look pretty similar.
Mhm.
So I guess I'm curious, as you guys were starting to get settled and as some people started to figure out who you were, what you were about, what's their response to it? Some Christians coming into kind of quote unquote their field? Like were they open to you guys? What was their reception when you guys started kind of making some roots there?
It's all across the board. I mean, you get people that, and I need to clarify too that in the last 10 years, things have shifted dramatically.
Mm.
The last census was 90%, 0.8%. I think that since then, it'll be really interesting to see what the next census says, because I think it's going to be dramatically different. Both people leaving the LDS church, and a lot of people moving in from California, and a lot of Christians are leaving California to find more of a conservative state and things like that. So I think things are different now than what they were 10 years ago. But yeah, some people were genuinely excited. Some people were curious. Some people were very resistant. I had some guys in the neighborhood that just said, "So what do you do?" We actually bought the old bishop's house unknowingly.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, and so like we had some friends in our neighborhood that said, "Yeah, we were kind of warned about you." Well, not warned, but we were kind of told that here's this Christian pastor coming in here. So, it was kind of a unique situation. And so they were like, "Well, why are you here? Why are you here?" And it kind of clicked one night when I was talking with some of the guys, and I said, "Well, how many of you guys served your 2-year LDS mission?" Because that's a very common experience in the church. And most of the guys, I think all the guys that I was talking to had, I said, "And where did you go?" And some of them had gone to like Arkansas. I think one had even been to Nebraska. And I said, "Well, just imagine us the same way.
Yeah.
You came to the Bible Belt, and we respect that. You believe what you believe, and I believe what I believe. And so we care. We want to spread that good news." And so some people really respect that. Some people are curious. Some people resist it. Just like if, a mosque would open up in Hillsborough, Kansas, like people would, "Oh, that's interesting." So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good comparison. Drew, I guess I'm curious from your journey too, because you kind of mentioned you kind of had an idea of what church planting, being a pastor might be like, but you kind of ended up in a spot that's way different. Anything else that you want to add as you were kind of getting settled? What else stuck out to you?
Yeah. Well, my first interaction with the LDS church happened right after I graduated college. Was living with a few guys in Hillsborough, and we got a knock on the door, and 2 LDS missionaries, believe it or not, in Hillsborough, Kansas, wanted to chat. And so we invited them in and learned that we call them elders rather than by their first or last name. And so, but we had lunch and had a great time connecting. They shared a lot of what they believed, kind of the history of the church with Joseph Smith, and then got into, how the gospel was restored through him, and the Book of Mormon, and then some of the doctrinal things that are very key to them. And I was blown away in a lot of ways, but in other ways, I'm kind of like, this sounds so much the same as our own faith. Like there's a lot of biblical doctrinal principles here that I believe. And so on one hand, I was blown away. On the other hand, I was very confused, because at the same time, Jason and Nicole were talking to us about moving out there, and like, wait, why are we going to a place that believes something pretty much the same thing? And only until, you dig deeper and you study more and you ask deeper questions, do you start to realize, okay, a lot of the terminology is the same, but how we define so many of those things is greatly different. And so that's a huge thing that I had to learn and grow in, is just, okay, are we talking about the same thing, or is this completely different? And trying to get on trying to understand each other in that. And so, then when we moved out here, it was a big learning curve in a lot of ways. I had a really crazy opportunity. The first 3 years we were here, I worked bivocationally in the local high school, and I worked in the special ed department one-on-one with a student, and he took seminary, which is, again, another word that is defined completely differently than our understanding. It's not a master's program. It's their high school LDS curriculum, where they leave school, they walk across the parking lot to the seminary building, which is
Okay.
technically, not part of the school grounds, even though it sits in a little corner in the parking lot. But
Sure.
anyways, it's an elective class, so you can take seminary for an hour and a half out of your school day. It's optional, so members of the church will go, and those that aren't won't. But I got to sit in with the student I worked with for 2 years. Yeah, 2 years in seminary, and it was crazy because I just got to be a sponge. And they would go through the Book of Mormon one year, the Doctrine and Covenants another year, and then it got really fun when they got to the New Testament another year, and just hearing it from themselves. Like, this isn't hearsay. This is from the own LDS curriculum, what they believe and teach. And so I got to ask a lot of questions. They even asked me to like pray in class on several occasions. I'm like, this is crazy. A youth pastor in an LDS seminary. I don't know if that's ever happened. So I'm thankful I didn't get kicked out, because I needed that experience to learn. And I think a big part of coming out here was, instead of just going in and, hey, we're going to debate, it's us versus them. Like, we needed to stop and learn the culture, learn the context, listen to them, ask questions, read books. Even there's been opportunities where neighbors have invited us to come to their LDS sacrament meetings on Sundays. And so we say, yeah, if we're getting invited into the community in that way, let's go. That's incredible. And then going to the temple and talking with missionaries and just doing tours there and things like that. We just really felt like we needed to become students, or we became anything more than that. And so that was and Jason and Nicole really shepherded us in that. They're like, this is a slow journey. We're out here for the long haul. And so take time to learn, and take time to, make sure you're abiding and cultivating your own faith and what you believe, because it's going to be hard, and there's going to be hard questions asked. And if we try to rush through things, we're going to miss what God wants to do along the way. So, but it was a huge learning curve, and God taught me a lot about myself and a lot about who he is and the people we get to live with during those first few years. And two, I try not to brag them up too much, but just want to shout out Jason and Nicole, because again, they just modeled an incarnational way of living that was fairly foreign to me. We'd go into a coffee shop and Jason knew everyone there by name, and would be able to just strike up conversation. I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. But it just modeled how Christ's love compelled him to love the people on his path. And same with Nicole. And we were just so attracted to that way of living. Like, we get to live on mission, not out of a place of duty or obligation, but God has given us an incredible gift of representing him to a lost people. And so just learned a lot about relationship and organic living and community through that time.
Well, that's awesome. So I want to kind of keep going on that topic, because kind of what we're talking about today, this whole living missionally idea, is kind of the umbrella we're talking about. A couple episodes here we're talking about. And so I think anytime that anyone, whether it's a missions context or church planting, like, you have to know your audience, right? Even in business, you have to know your audience, right? That's what you have to do. And so I'm already gathering that for you guys, you do things differently from a lot of people who might be listening in different U.S. church contexts. So tell us more about what you were just saying there, Drew. Either one of you can chime in. What do you do at Greenhouse that's different from a lot of the MB church leaders listening?
I don't know if we're doing anything terribly different. I mean, we might focus on different strategies, and we always say we do certain things and don't do certain things very intentionally. And I think sometimes it's too easy to get caught up in, a narrow focus, so to speak. One of the things, our whole thing is Greenhouse. Why Greenhouse, right? That's one of the worst things for the church. It's just awful. Like, it's just such a weird name, and we get asked what we grow and things like that. I mean, heck, we've even gotten letters from the University of Wyoming Agricultural School, like, what are your best growing practices? And I was kind of like, well, discipleship, word,
Or anymore, like, are you guys at a dispensary, or what kinds of stuff are you guys?
Exactly. It's kind of like John Christ, church or dispensary, right? There was a greenhouse on there. I was very proud of that. So, but no, I think it was Joanna Chapa that when we were I was getting ready to speak at Ascent this year, and we were going to give a presentation on different faiths and things. And I think it was either her or Stephen Humber that talked about developing a posture of curiosity.
Hmm.
And it is so fun to have Drew in this school. And even though Nicole and I had been here for 6 years before they got here, it was really fun to still have that curiosity and to learn as he was learning. And it is just, I mean, and here we are, 10 years later, a total of 13 years, and I still feel like I'm learning and things like that. And we really want to encourage people to do that. But anyhow, back to greenhouse. Why greenhouse, right? Greenhouse is a place where soil is broken, seeds are planted, so those seeds are watered, cultivated, fertilized, just poured into, and we want to see that. And Jesus talks a lot about seeds and weeds and all sorts of practices like that. And so that really spoke to us, and we want to grow disciples who love God, love people, and serve the world. And that's the great commandment and the great commission. And so everything that we do, we try to focus through those things. I think it was Tom Rainier has the book, Simple Church. And that was really foundational. Like, how do we focus on who we are, and what God has us here for?
Yeah.
And instead of getting lost in the tall weeds of all sorts of other stuff that might make sense in a, traditional setting, like that might not translate here. And so just trying to keep things very simple, very focused. And I mean, we have a very simple approach to ministry, to life. We have Sunday mornings, we have men's group, women's group, youth ministry, children's ministry, and that's about it. We don't have a lot of boards and committees. We really want to free people up to live on mission, to be discipled and to disciple others 7 days a week, to where, and a part of that too is this rhythm of gathering and scattering. We're called to gather, but we're also called to scatter. And I think sometimes it's easy to just focus on the gathering, like somehow if we can just get people to church, then they're going to find Jesus. And Jesus, yes, he goes to churches, but he also goes out to find the one, right? And he calls his disciples to follow. He says, go and scatter and be salt, be light. I remember, I forget what book it was in, but it was sort of like, if, we're not salt blocks, we're not salt licks, we're salt shakers. We don't want people just to come in and lick a salt block at church. No, all of us are followers of Jesus, and we're called to go into our daily lives and to shake the salt, into that life and add flavor and value and in that. So that's kind of a small, I don't know, Drew, you can probably articulate it better than I can, but that's kind of a small sampling, I guess. And again, I don't think that's radically different. I don't think we're super unique in that, but we just are pretty ruthless with trying to stay simply focused around that. And
Yeah. I'll add a little bit to that. There's a book, Small is Big, Slow is Fast, Caesar Kalinowski. We walked through it together as a team right when we moved out here, but it's just been foundational and just giving us just some incredible concepts and ways of life. It talks about how discipleship is not a program, it's a lifestyle. And I've just learned a lot about what it looks like to live as a disciple. Like, it's who we are rather than just what we do. And so and he has a quote in there that says, discipleship is the process of going from gospel unbelief to gospel belief in every area of your lives. And if you think about that, it's convicting for me, because I'm like, man, there's still a lot of areas where God is is breaking up stuff and trying to sanctify some stubbornness and different areas of my life where I'm, still not believing the truth of the gospel. And so when you think about how the gospel impacts every area of your lives, we're like, it's so much more than an hour on Sunday. It's through our jobs, it's in our neighborhoods, it's in our homes with our families, it's just on our athletic teams and the teams we get to coach and things like that. Like, how can we speak gospel fluency into every area of our lives? And we can't do that unless we're rooted in our own gospel identity. And so again, it just comes back to, who is Jesus? And so, like Jason was saying, nothing that we do is unique, but it's, who is he and how did he model ministry? And he walked with people through mess and through awkward things for a long period of time. Even if they rejected it, Jesus was present with people. And so just trying to remember that wherever we're at, especially when we're not in church, like, Jesus, give me eyes to see, usually those on the margins, the people that Jesus would go after. And so I think that's just a focus. Just, yeah, God, give me eyes to see where there needs to be more gospel belief. And yeah, we can talk more practically about what that looks like too, but that's just kind of the driving force, living from that gospel identity with that.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing for us too, is we try to lead by example of mission beyond the church. And so, we have both Allie and Nicole teach, and so they live missionally in their schools, and Drew he's coached youth sports teams. He's worked at the high school. He's a PE teacher at one of our local elementary schools. It's funny because, we'll be out, Drew and I will be out in the community, and it's like, Mr. Drew, and kids that he's had in his PE classes, and it's just fun to recognize. I've been able to, work at a local restaurant early on. I worked at a organization that helped people that were escaping polygamy, because that's actually a pretty common thing in our area here.
Yeah.
And then coaching youth sports, basketball, football, coaching at the high school. I've known some pastors that tried to get out into their community, whether it through, music or school or whatever it might be, however God's gifted them. And they faced resistance from their churches because they worked for that church. Instead of the churches rallying behind their pastor who wants to get out into the community and engage in relationship and mission and meaningful, tangible ways. And that for us, we try to lead by example, and then say, hey, we're doing this, and we invite you to join in that too. And that's been really fun. Just really trying to focus on the other 6.5 days out of the week. So our Sunday mornings are so much fun. We love it. We have really good music. Teaching is good whenever Drew or Rich or one of our other people there, that's pretty good. But no, I mean, we have a good time together. But again, we focus on being a family, and we're a family that is living on mission together, discovering Jesus together. But the Sunday morning is only one expression of that. We focus a lot on our connect groups throughout the week. We focus on just, living that mission out every day. So yeah.
That's awesome. You guys mentioned, I think earlier, that I think Drew said that, Jason, you walked into a coffee shop and everybody knew you, and you kind of joked that you did some kind of Bible study or something in a sports bar or maybe a sports restaurant, whatever. And I love that idea. And I think you're right that what you're talking about, this being really active and known and seen in your community, I think that's good for all of us, no matter what, our denomination or our, community background or whatever. I think that's wise for all of us.
Yeah.
I guess this is maybe one of those things where there's pros and cons to different kinds of ministries. Because, for example, the church where I work, we have a lot of meetings. We have a ton of events at the church, and it's a lot of like stuff at the church, right? But I love that you guys are focused on getting out in your community, and you're, meeting people and doing things outside of the church. You're coaching different things. Can you just talk more about that, especially maybe with trying to reach these LDS people? Is that kind of working for you guys? Are you meeting people that way that wouldn't come otherwise? Like, you just tell us more stories of how being in the community has been beneficial to you guys.
The traditional church planting metrics was bucks, bricks, and butts, right? Can I say that on this podcast?
Yes, absolutely.
Bottoms. But no, I mean, and it's basically that is their traditional metrics. And one of the things that we had to kind of surrender were those metrics. And I'll give a quick shout out to Jeff Nichols, because he was my ministry coach for my first, leading up to moving back to Utah, and then the first couple of years. And he just really helped me navigate through external expectations and internal expectations.
Okay. And
really to listen to those voices and what I needed to listen to and what I just had to kind of block out. And just the expectation of kind of a propositional linear movement, right? Do this and then receive this. And if we do this, then we'll grow more. If we do this, then we'll get more people in. If we do this, and instead, like, how do we have the same attitude of Christ, who being God himself didn't grasp onto that, but poured himself out in obedience, even to the point of death. That's the ultimate surrender, right? And so So how do we not look, healthy things are going to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Healthy things, if things aren't growing, it must mean that there is some unhealth there at some point.
Yeah.
So it's not like, hey, let's just hang out and call it good.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, that growth is going to be very slow. But also, how do you measure growth, right? Like Sunday morning worship attendance is only one metric.
Mm-hmm.
How are people being engaged? And so we always laugh that, whereas we have like 100, 150 on a Sunday morning at any given Sunday, if everybody would show up, we'd probably have closer to 200. Well,
Mm-hmm.
but if everybody in our communities that call Greenhouse their church, it'd be dramatically more. And we kind of have this idea of rings of a tree, right? Like you have your core Greenhouse people, you have your people that are kind of plugging in and further out, and how God is impacting our community through this church and in other churches, obviously too. And so just being more surrendered in that, and not obsessing about just one element of that.
Yeah.
Having a fuller, broader view of that. So I think that's been really big for us, is just knowing who we are and knowing who we aren't, right? Like God has called one body, many parts, and that's individually, but that's also church-wise. Like God is using all these different churches for different things, and he's called them, equipped them, resourced them. And so we just try to focus on what God is doing in and through us. So,
and to add to that, I mean, we've talked about it a little bit, but just the unique aspect of our context is, like Jason said, many are leaving the LDS church, and that comes at a huge cost.
Mm-hmm.
So many people that leave it's almost like committing social suicide.
Right.
You lose friendships, families can cut you off, similar to Islam in a lot of ways, actually. Cultural rejection, things like that. It can impact jobs and different things. And so that's a huge thing that we try to be sensitive to for people that have left, and if they leave for doctrinal concerns or issues that they have, it can take them many years to build up trust in a church and scripture and a leader and Jesus. And so you kind of see, tragically, a lot of people throw the baby out with the bathwater, and we'll go the other extreme of nothing matters, like live for self, right? And kind of agnostic or atheist. But to them, it's like, oh, this is freedom in their eyes, because they're not under a religious system anymore. But in that journey, I think the average years it takes for someone who leaves, if they become an evangelical born again Christian, it's about 6 or 7 years. And so, you can't rush that. That's something we've learned, is that you have to be willing to die to expectations, because these are people, these are their lives, these are their stories, these are their families. And so just not treating people as projects or with an agenda. It's like, let's journey this together, and let's ask hard questions. Let's disentangle what we thought was true. And maybe there's something else that's true. We don't know, but we'll see, and we'll walk that out together. And so then again, we're just trying to build a lot of relational trust and not shortcut what God's trying to do there. And so that's a big part of it too. And just, that's why it might look a little bit different here than other places as well.
I love hearing that, because it just, like he said, context. We have so many church damaged, church hurt people in our context. And so we want to be very aware of where those pinch points are, and to do whatever we can to avoid those. So there's things like giving. Like, we do not take an offering. We don't even we have one giving box that is pathetically tiny in one area of the studio that we rent. We have one slide before and afterwards. We never talk about taking an offering, because in our context, their eternal destiny is tied to their giving 10%. And so there's a lot of damage with that. So that's a risk. And so that's one thing where actually Nicole's dad, Jules Glanzer, who was a church planter in Houston, when we talked with him, he said, this sounds great, but you're going to have to change your metrics. I love your strategy, but you're going to have to change your metrics. And so one of the things that we talked about was just building partnerships, not just sponsors or givers or things like that, but true partners that were willing to be in the long haul for us, prayer-wise, relationally, and financially. And man, God has just been so ridiculously faithful with that. And we have churches and individuals that have stood by us and made it possible because they understand, hey, this is a real source of hurt and pain for people, even membership. Like, we just don't have membership. As a lot of times, it's again, salvation is tied to membership to the church.
Right.
And we want to avoid that. Like, how do we demonstrate that in a healthy way? Dress like what people wear, be very free and appropriate, and not focus on, hey, it is between you and God. And so just being really sensitive to that context. And that's the thing. All of us have our context. Things are going to make sense or not make sense. Things are going to either bring up hurt or healing. Right. And so just being aware of our context is really key.
One thing I'm noticing more and more as you guys are talking is I think it's just kind of a weird thing, but I think you guys, it might be a weird blessing in disguise, because I think what you're talking about is, I think, what pretty much all American churches are going to have to start doing more of. Like, because like Drew, I think you mentioned that for most LDS people, it takes about 6 years. I wonder what the average, quote unquote, none and done, the average non-Christian in America today, they probably have church hurt. They know a bunch about the scandals. There's reasons why they're not there. So I think more and more we can probably learn from you guys, because I think that's going to be more and more the context that all of us are going to be working in, right? I think it's not going to be this spontaneous Billy Graham crusade, change your life, turn your life around, and now you're a Christian. I think for everybody, it's going to be that slow, long burn where you meet, you discover a pastor in a coffee shop, you find out your PE teacher is a Christian. And like, I think that's how more and more people are going to come to know God, is through those kinds of relationships. I mean, would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. I forget where I heard that, but the gospel moves at the speed of relationship. Relationship moves at the speed of trust.
Yeah.
And I think what we're seeing here, but like you said, nationally, a lot of people don't want church. They're leaving the church. What they want is relationship.
Yeah.
And so how do we as the body of Christ help people to discover that relationship with Christ? Yeah. And I think too often it's easy to focus on getting people connected to our church, to our brand, to our programs, to our this, to our that. Yeah. And we're unintentionally creating consumers. Well, consumers are great until they're unhappy, dissatisfied. I'll move on to the next thing. Right. Whereas a relationship is like you said, that slow burn. It's that long obedience in the same direction, right? And it's consistent. And relationship is where we have conflict. Conflict is where we get to live out the reality of the redemptive grace of Jesus. Yep. And so how do we live that out in tangible ways? And so, instead of just getting people to church, it's sort of like, no, Jesus is the focus. It is the focus. And
Well, our time's going fast here. I want to at least get one more question squeezed in before we wrap up here. So I guess if people are listening, again, we've done a couple episodes on LDS stuff, so we didn't get too deep into that today. If people want to, you can find some other ones in the archive. But I guess if people do know people in LDS, or again, like we were just saying, people who just aren't religious, I'd just love to hear from you guys. Like, what about Christianity is drawing people away from LDS or just to faith in general? I think a lot of us listening are so entrenched into ministry, we kind of forget some of the things that you guys probably see with fresher eyes. So when you run into people or you have that slow burn relationship, what about Jesus is different from LDS that you are using to kind of rope them in?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, because there's obviously the concentration of LDS is so high here, but they're everywhere. And you'll probably, if you haven't yet, you'll probably get to know them before you know it. But yeah, I think there's a bunch of different things, like reasons for why people are having doubts or maybe leaving the church. I mean, obviously one of them is just they'll look at the history of the church and things with polygamy and African Americans not being able to hold the priesthood until the 1970s and things like that. Just things in the history that are concerning. They'll look at doctrinal things. They're like, hey, wait a second, that doesn't line up. Like there's a contradiction here of some sort, or it doesn't match what they believe to be true. Another thing is that people are tired. there's a long checklist, and there's the atonement, ensures that everyone is resurrected. But then after that, it's a ladder of things you've got to do, and boxes you've got to check of worthiness and morality and attendance and things like that. And we talk to people all the time who are just, if they're being honest and genuine, they're worn out, and they're they're wondering, like, is this it? And their religion is that they eternally progress. So even in the afterlife, when they've worked extremely hard, there's always more, there's always more, there's always more. And so just offering them good news of rest. And the gospel offers rest. Jesus says, come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I'll give you rest for your souls. So I think that's just incredibly good news. And just grace, knowing that, we don't have to hide our failures, our weakness, our shortcomings. Those are actually incredible doorways to experiencing grace. And that the gospel is that, and it's not our own works or deeds or commitments that makes us worthy before God, but it's who he is and what he's done for us. And so just asking questions along those lines, I think just being curious, there's a phrase out here, we got to fight criticism with curiosity. And rather than, hey, let me tell you where you're wrong, it's let me ask questions. I'm curious. And then just again, being able to kind of speak gospel into things they're experiencing and questioning, things like that. And just being a friend along the way.
I think on top of that too, 3 questions that I think of is what is the good news for these people right here, right now? Like, how does the good news of Jesus apply? Like, what is the hunger? What is the tiredness? What is the exhaustion? What is the need? And how does that articulate? And I think in order to discover what the needs of the community are, you have to be in the community.
Yeah.
You have to be in it. I always laugh, growing up in Henderson, it was 1,000 people, and Saratoga Springs is only like 20, 25 years old. And we're already at 50,000 people.
Wow.
And explosive growth. And it's just terrifying to me. My kids' high school class is bigger than my entire hometown. Right. So I've always laughed. I said, my personal mission is to make Saratoga Springs a big, small town,
Yeah.
So like, how do we get out to the community? Do we know the mayor? Do we know the people in schools, things like that? And so do we know the needs? Do we know the need for the good news? And then the second question is what is so good about the good news? And can I articulate that in a way that connects? And then the third thing is, does my life demonstrate in meaningful ways that good news? Or am I just saying one thing on Sunday, and then I just kind of just hide away in the church or my office or wherever with a bunch of other Christian people the rest of the week? Or am I living out that good news 24/7, 365? And so that's where I think, that applies anywhere. You can ask those 3 questions anywhere you're at. And I think they're gonna to guide us where we need to go. So,
yeah. I guess I got one more question. We probably need to wrap up here, but I have to ask one more question. So as either one of you guys are preaching, I'm just curious how much of your brain is wired to think of, okay, these are LDS people. I can't say this word. We can't talk about this topic. I might want to, we just can't. Like, is that kind of always in the back of your mind? And if you feel like you have to talk about giving or some other thing that is kind of a touchy thing, how do you do that? Maybe we'll kind of wrap up with that question.
One of the things I really learned at South Mountain, and Paul Roby really talked about this, and it's really stuck out to me is always read the audience, always know, and make sure you're being appropriate for the setting, right? And we choose not to ever say Mormonism, LDS, temple, anything like that, because we want to be very sensitive. We don't want to alienate people. We don't want to put up barriers. We want to tear down barriers. And so, like, especially on our Sunday morning gatherings, we want to be very, very honoring, to where people aren't going to feel like, oh, wow, I think I was just being attacked, right? Yeah. I remember hearing that, and that has just really, really stood out to me, to us. And we've really tried to continue to live that out. Whereas some people would say, be way more direct, sort of like, why? Let's speak in a way that is going to show that truth no matter what, right?
Yeah, right.
And you can but yeah, you're exactly right. Almost every Sunday, I'm sitting there thinking, I mean, even like this last Sunday, we had our 10-year celebration, and somebody that we met at an interfaith council recently, he walked in. It was like, oh my gosh, this guy works for the LDS church, and just a fantastic, fantastic guy. We have our Christmas concert. We have, well, how many did we have at our Christmas concert this year, Drew? Was it like 250?
Yeah, 250 maybe.
Yeah, I think it was like 250, almost 300 or something like that. And we had a lot of our LDS neighbors and friends and people like that. And so just speaking in a way that is honoring to the gospel and inviting, building bridges and not bait and switch or anything like that, just being very, very genuine. But yeah, it's a constant, you're always, processing through that. But really, again, that's almost in any setting, right? Like anybody who's going to get up and teach as a shepherd, as a pastor, what's going on in the church that you're a part of, right? And so trying to speak in a way that, and that's why I think just being really sensitive to the leading of the Holy Spirit and being very wise and sensitive, and just surrendering that. Okay, I'm gonna preach the word, I'm gonna teach the word, and then the Spirit is going to move how He deems fit. So it's pretty fun, but it can be pretty distracting. I always laugh with Nicole on the way to lunch afterwards. I was like, man, my brain was going 100 miles an hour this morning.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of my big takeaway is I think each of us, if we're, I guess, smart and strategic, there are individual things that are unique about our communities that we need to be aware of, like you were just saying there, Jason. But again, I think one of my big takeaways is I think you guys are leading the charge. Like, I think this is going to be more and more the norm that we all need to get used to, getting out of our buildings and not get so stuck in church world that we forget the community around us, because that's more and more of the people that we're going to be trying to reach. So I thank you, because I think that's been a refreshing reminder for me and hopefully for everybody listening. So I think you guys are doing an awesome job.
I appreciate that. We've learned from a lot of great people and a lot of great books. Like Drew said, Small is Big, Slow is Fast by Caesar Kalinowski is a fantastic roadmap. It gave us language to where our hearts were already at. Yeah. But I think just remembering too, if you're hearing this, God has you where He has you for a reason. Yeah. And never underestimate the value, the importance of who God has made you to be and where He's planted you, and the opportunities that you're surrounded by every day. And whether you go out and coach in a school gym or you build a gym like your church did there in Wichita, like God is going to use that. It creates a third space where the community is going to come in and experience the goodness of Jesus. Yeah. And you didn't just build that for the church, you built that for the community, for God to use, Right. And, we all have opportunities and resources like that. So why does God have us where He has us, and what can we do to be obedient, surrendered, faithful, and just join in?
Well, again, I love what you guys are doing. Thank you for the hard work. I know it's hard work, so thank you for your dedication to Utah and the great work that you guys are doing. I love it. Thank you guys for being generous with your time, and we just pray for more and more blessings on you and your church. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Matt. It's been a privilege.
What does it mean to be a peacemaker? The September-October issue of the Christian Leader magazine explores this topic in light of the upcoming 10th anniversary of the revision to Article 13 of the USMB Confession of Faith on love, peacemaking, and reconciliation. Featured articles focus on the importance of being peacemakers and reflect on the process of changing the USMB Confession of Faith. To read more or subscribe, visit www.christianleadermag.com.
Well, as you heard me say a few times there, I'm just a really big fan of Jason and Drew and the way that they're choosing to do their ministry in Utah and Saratoga Springs there. And like we talked about, I think this is going to be the most successful way for us to do evangelism and ministry in the years to come. As our culture gets more and more post-Christian, we're going to need to do that hard work of the long-term relationships, that slow burn that we talked about so often. So even if your community doesn't look like theirs, where you're kind of surrounded by people of a different faith, I think this is so wise and really a strategy that I think we should all be looking to do more and more effectively. So Jason and Drew, thanks again for modeling incarnational mission, and I hope for all of us there's at least something that we can take away to implement in our communities. All right, so thanks again so much for listening today. Hope you have a great rest of your week, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time here on Lead Pods.
Thanks for listening to Lead Pods. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing to our show wherever you're listening today. Learn more by visiting usmb.org. And be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll see you next time as we learn more practical tools to increase our impact together.